Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is a special podcast day. Normally we do it on Thursday, but because we've had a big event happen last week, we have it today. What a difference a week makes. Okay, we're going to cover a lot of things. Of course, what is on everyone's mind is the election, and what does it really mean to the stock market? And with that, also what possible tax law changes we could have. And then we did have, believe it or not, a Federal Reserve reduce interest rates by 0.25%, although it seems like a non-issue right now. And then we'll talk about some of the sectors we like and don't like, and end up with a few year-end planning ideas. So with that, of course, I'm Layla Pence, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm joined with our Chief Investment Officer, Dryden Pence, who will address the first question, which is, Dryden, at the end of the day, what we care about, I mean, there's a lot of issues that go with this election, but we really are here to grow our clients' assets and protect our client assets. And what we care about is what is happening to the stock market and the bond market, which I'll ask you about as well later, because it is different depending on the market that you're looking at. But what does it mean? What does this election mean?
Sure. Well, for those of you who get our newsletter, and we send a special edition of the newsletter out in anticipation of the election, the most important thing was that the Republicans ended up with control of the Senate. And now what's happened is the Republicans have control of the Senate. The Republicans have control of the White House. And it looks like we're very, very close to a moment where the Republicans might end up with a 2-vote majority in the House of Representatives, which would make it a thin margin, but then they would have the trifecta, if you will, all 3 houses of Congress. Now, why is this from an economic market standpoint most important? As long as you had the risk of Kamala Harris being president or a blue sweep, if you will, the exact opposite, you were looking at a possibility of a 28% corporate tax. Okay, a 28% corporate tax would have been very negative for the stock market. It would have resulted in probably an $8 to $13 a share reduction in earnings of the stock market. As we all know, earnings are the most important, and you would have seen probably 700 points or more come off the S&P 500. So the big point here is what did not happen, right? We no longer are at risk of corporate taxes being increased. That means corporations can plan their profitability, they can plan their margins, they can have predictions of what's going to happen from now through 2025, 2026, 27, and beyond. So this is really, really the significant piece, okay? So now you have that being the case. Now because of that was if the Republicans won the Senate. That happened, right? So now you're in this situation where we don't have a tax increase on corporate taxes, where we do have a possibility of reduced regulations, because as we know that Donald Trump is not a big fan of government regulations. So you're going to see an environment where we have a less stringent regulatory environment. You're going to see increases in mergers and acquisitions, probably about $1 trillion worth of M&A activity on the sidelines will probably come forward. So if you sum it up, you look at this environment, we have no tax increase, we have more buybacks, right? This really the buybacks, that $1 trillion I was talking about. You have more stimulus because Trump's a spender, not a saver necessarily. You have less regulation. You have lower interest rates because of what the Fed's doing. All of those come together to give you a very positive environment for the stock market and for corporate earnings. So as all of those things come together, that's why the market is taking this as a very favorable reaction. And what's important for us to do now is to parse this out and look at what it means in the future, not just in 2025, but 26 and 27. So I think that we're actually positioned quite well for that, and we're positioned in a situation that this is why the market has reacted favorably. It's about policy. It's more about policy than it is about politics, right? It's more about profits than it is about personalities. It's more about earnings than it is about elections. Those are the things we're going to focus on.
And is it true also that shouldn't be much breakup of technology companies?
I think that the idea that we were going to break up the technology companies because some of the antitrust provisions and things like that, I think was probably negative. Here's the thing: the United States maintains its position as a technological innovator because we have two things going on. We have great big companies that spend a tremendous amount of money on R&D, that come up with innovative technologies that further advance our economy and increase labor productivity. Unless you're really, really big, you can't build billions and billions of dollars into R&D. You can't afford it, right? So we have two big things at transformational technology companies. They're either really big or they're brilliant. They're a small company that does something really, really well, like in AI or something like they have something really, really well. But what happens to those small companies? Those small companies tend to have something they do really, really well, and then they get bought out by private equity or get bought out by someone else, so that the capital structure is there to be innovative about growing and developing technology. So when you have a regulatory environment that allows the big guys to be big and spend a tremendous amount of money, not only do you have a lot of innovation coming out of the big guys, you also have people taking risk at the small end of the scale because they know they can have an exit, and that exit would be someone bigger that comes in and buys them. So an environment that allows animal spirits, an environment that allows this capital formation in this country to do what the American economy does is typically more favorable for technological development. It's more favorable for economic development. It's more favorable for profits all along the spectrum, whether you're really big or you're really small. And I think those are the things that are going to be most important.
So with everything you just said, that's going to be very favorable for the stock market. But unfortunately, that may be unfavorable to the bond market, the long bond. Talk about that.
Well, okay, so there's a couple things going on in the bond market. First of all, guess what, folks? We're going to get a normalized yield curve. You know, we've had an inverted yield curve for now. We're going to get a normal one. The Federal Reserve is lowering the short-term interest rates. The Federal Reserve really controls the short-term interest rates. They don't control long-term rates, right? So the Fed is bringing down short-term rates because they've been restrictive enough. They've kind of stuck the landing on this thing, and you're going to see short-term rates go down a quarter point, probably get another quarter point in December, probably get another quarter point first quarter, and they're going to move as we get in through 2025 into probably where neutral is. Neutral is probably 3, which is what they say it is. And for the audience, what neutral means is you have an interest rate that is neither stimulative or restrictive. It's just about right. You know, it's the Goldilocks interest rate. So that's probably 3. What that means is the long bond, right, the longer term bonds will have higher interest rates than the short-term bonds. The higher interest rates will probably go up a little bit because if you have growth, if you have inflation, if you have any of those things of a growing economy, people are going to, it means you're not going to have a recession, right? And people are going to demand higher interest rates for tying up their money for a longer period of time. Money goes where it's treated best. And so for that reason, you're going to continue, you would see right now, you would see long-term interest rates maybe rising a little bit, and you see short-term interest rates maybe falling a little bit, and a yield curve maybe normalizing a little bit, because the expectations are that we're going to have more growth in the future, and that would be what would demand a little bit higher interest rates on the long end.
Okay, so with that, what Dryden said, one of the main reasons the market is going up is because of the potential keeping corporate tax rates the same. But in fact, he's also talked about reducing the effective corporate tax rate on domestic production to 15%.
Right. And this is this is part of Trump trade policy, and this is also why we like small cap and mid cap manufacturing and industrial companies. There is a proposal out there that we're going to lower corporate taxes for companies that make stuff here in the United States. Now, if you think of global tax rates, so again, global corporate tax rates are in that, we used to be at 28, we lowered to 20, and look what happened. We ended up creating 6.1 million more jobs here in the United States, right? So it worked, right? Onshoring worked, lower taxes worked, we created jobs worked, drove our economy better. We've grown the equivalent of France in the last 4 years, our GDP. So all that worked, right? So now what you do is if you keep the corporate tax rate low on a competitive basis globally, you continue to have people move jobs to this country. If you lower it even further, then you're taking the manufacturing of the heartland and giving it a competitive advantage globally. So jobs that used to be outsourced and sent overseas will be more likely to come here because our tax policy will be more favorable to them. So you could see production capacity, manufacturing capacity, all of those things that drive fundamentals, okay, actually continuing to onshore into the United States. I mean, people ask me, what do you think about this stuff? And I've been on media about it. I said, look, let's look for companies that make stuff and that are located between the Appalachian Mountains and the Rocky Mountains. Why? Because your real estate cost is less, your labor cost is less, your interest rates are going to be going down because of the Fed, and you ship anywhere in the world, right? Because we have a good rail and barge network. And so the point of the matter is, if you're located between the Appalachian Mountains and the Rocky Mountains, chances are it's a non-union shop, and you have lower wages. So you have a company that has, historically lower wages. They're going to get lower taxes. They're going to have a stronger competitive advantage globally. And those are going to be your small and mid-cap industrialized companies. And we think they're going to do pretty darn well. They're going to have better earnings that turns into better stock price.
Very good. All right, so I'm going to go through right now just a list of his wish list on the tax law. Some of them you'll find very interesting that will actually benefit some of you. So the first thing is that he's talking about the child tax credit going to $5,000 per child versus the $2,000 right now. But the big thing I believe is the elimination or some changes to the SALT deduction. As you know, in California, right now we are limited to $10,000 in deduction when it comes to state taxes and property taxes, and most of us pay a lot more than that for property taxes. So that $10,000 really hit us quite a bit. So he's talking about maybe removing that completely or some increase to that. So that would definitely reduce our income taxes quite a bit if that happens. In addition to that, he's talking about actually creating an itemized deduction for auto loan interest. So right now, for a long time, if you borrow to get a car, because he wants to increase the production of cars in the United States, right? So he's talking about allowing that interest deduction on auto loans to be deductible. So that would be a really good thing. He's also talking about keeping the estate tax law changes or making them permanent, which would be a really good thing. This is one thing many of you were very afraid about. The exemption right now is over 13 million. It was supposed to go down to 5 million, but if he extends the current tax law, it will maintain the same, and he may make it permanent. Also, there's a lot of business tax provisions, like 100% bonus depreciation, research and development expensing. Those would also become effective on 1/1/26. But my favorite one of all is the fact he's talked about eliminating taxes on our Social Security income. In the law, for the long time, because you are paying taxes on your Social Security when you deduct it, it used to be where Social Security income was tax-free. Right now, the state of California is tax-free. It is not taxable. He's talking about making that also tax-free on the federal level. That would be a huge, huge benefit for most of you who are retired, because right now 85% of Social Security income for most of you is taxable. That would be down to zero. And he's also talking about exempting overtime pay from income taxes. So if you work overtime, you wouldn't have to pay taxes on that at all, and also eliminating taxes on tips. A lot of us, in the old days, when you get tips, you got it in cash, but now most tips come on credit cards or Zelle or some form of that, and the government is having you pay taxes on that. So eliminating tax on tips would really be beneficial for the average individuals who live on that. Most people who live on tips, that is most of their income as opposed to the salary, and they work very hard for that. So this would be a big boom for those workers. And those are some of the things that I thought would be quite important for most of you. There's a lot more of a list there. And the bad thing that, of course, he's talking about is some of the ways she's going to pay for that is putting tariffs on foreign companies, foreign countries. So, Jordan, can you talk about that? Because that is something that people have brought up and is concerning, like he's talking about putting a tariff on China.
In most cases, the sausage of legislation and budgets and Capitol Hill always goes into what's the pay for. How do you pay for this tax cut? So you can do things through budget reconciliation, because although the Republicans will win the Senate, they will not have 60 votes. And because of that, they're not going to be able to really jam down everything. They're going to have to work through some form of compromise. And so what's important to look at is and there are a tremendous amount of budget hawks in the Senate and in the House. So how do you do this unless you pay for it? Well, if Trump's comment is, well, we're going to pay for all these things via tariffs, that's how we're going to make up the revenue stream, then people go, oh my gosh, what's this tariffs problem? Well, first of all, I point out that we've seen this before. We've seen this. This is not a new script, right? We saw this script, 4 years ago, or actually 8 years ago, when it kind of all started, right? And the world did not come to an end because the United States placed tariffs on China. The world did not come to an end because we placed tariffs on bad actors. Tariffs are just another form of sanctions, right? So the point of the matter is that we use tariffs to enforce a couple of different behaviors, right? If everybody played fair in the sandbox, then yeah, the argument against tariffs would hold up. But people don't play fair in the sandbox, right? Nations do things, they subsidize things, they use slave labor, they use all of these other things that try to get a competitive advantage against the United States. Well, by using tariffs, we can actually try to even that playing field. And when you even the playing field, American commerce wins. When you even the playing field, American production wins. If you even the playing field, American technology wins. And so the idea that tariffs are going to be the end of the world as we know it, I don't, and I'm an economist, folks, I don't see that as a case. I see that as a case of actually evening the playing field and doing so in a way that benefits the consuming country, right? So they say tariffs will be inflationary, perhaps, in that there will be an increase in some prices, but not in all prices. And it will also force us to get much more efficient as a nation in the United States as our competitive advantage. So I'm not one who thinks that tariffs are the end of the world here. I think that we've seen this before. I think that it's going to generate revenue. I think that it's going to actually allow some other good, positive policy things. I really like the idea of lowering the income, lowering the corporate taxes on people that produce things in the United States is a good thing. It's actually just another lever of the same deal. How do you make us have a greater competitive advantage in this nation vis-a-vis the globe? So while there's a lot of media that's going to scream and yell about how bad tariffs are, let's see what the tariffs actually are. Let's see how well they're focused. Let's see exactly the behavior that they're trying to encourage, and see what happens before we get too histrionic about it.
Okay, so with all that information that we have right now, what are some of the favorite sectors in the market, and what are the least favorite sectors in the market?
Well, in general, it's really hard to find a least favorite sector.
There's one.
It's probably, the long bond, but I think that the real issue here is with the favorite sectors. I think we're coming into an area where small caps and mid caps, industrials, I mentioned this before, are going to continue to do well. We really like infrastructure companies, companies that are involved in infrastructure. We have big positions in that, and we'll continue to expand those because we're going to see tremendous build of roads and bridges in this country. We have to do it, and there's funding for it. We like companies that are involved in that. We like companies that are going to be involved in the production of oil and gas because we're going to begin to see some of the regulatory impediments to that production go away. I think that we like, we basically like cyclicals and industrials and all of those things because you're going to see a continued demand signal here in this country for the growth that we have. So that, in addition to this, and I want to take a second on this thing, is talk about AI. And we've had AI ever since you had a GPS in your phone. That's a form of artificial intelligence, right? And so, but AI is now a good buzzword, artificial intelligence, for just, technology that makes us, that takes away the repetitive, is presumptive, moves forward, can assume and can predict things that are coming and prediction of demand. So anything involved with that, we like. I've always said buy chips on dips. But right now you got to break this up. There are two pieces, actually three. You have the infrastructure around artificial intelligence, which are the chips and the design of the chips and the manufacture of the chips and all the things that make AI work. Then you have the implementation of it, the companies that are actually taking AI and that industrial capacity, and they're saying, let's do something with it. And then you have the third component of what I call as AI plus H, and that's the real long-term dividend. AI plus H is artificial intelligence plus a human that increases labor productivity a tremendous amount. And when you do that, I mean, think about, I'm going to pick farming. The American, in 1850, we had 150 people had to bring in a crop of cotton for 600 acres, right? Now you have one person and a tractor. But now pretty soon it's going to be 0 people and a tractor driving itself, able to move at the exact right speed to maximize crop yield and fertilizer placed in exactly the right place to maximize crop yield and all of those kind of things. So when you look at the application of artificial intelligence plus increasing labor productivity, we now have a way, that's how you fight inflation, right? Increase labor productivity fights inflation. Increased labor productivity keeps our country strong. Increased labor productivity keeps us in a situation where we're able to have a great number of jobs for all the people that are here. So if you look at that, that's the area that we like the most. So we're going to have, you have the Magnificent Seven, the big AI companies, but it's also everybody else. So this is going to be a future wave, and we want to ride it.
And how about the semiconductor supply chain, the energy required to actually fuel that?
I think that you're going to see the thirst for energy is tremendous. Obviously, we're going to focus on fossil fuels now, and they're going to open that up. But simultaneously with the moving forward with fossil fuels, you're probably going to see a new wave of, you have companies buying nuclear power plants, right? You have small nuclear power plants that are manufactured that can be placed place close to the consumption factor. You have, I mean, there will be a moment when solar and wind and all of those things are economically better and viable. It's an all of the above solution set. And I think that we need everything, obviously, because our demand for energy is going to be insatiable. But I think the important thing is this demand for innovation around it. And I think that's going to be where we are. So we kind of like anything that touches. I like anything that makes human beings more productive.
Amen. Amen. Okay, so with that, basically, I think we've covered most things that we want to cover today. Just remember, if we have the top deduction come back in next year where you can deduct your property taxes, if you normally pay both installments of property taxes in December, just pay only the required, the first installment, and defer the second one to next year. So it may be deductible next year, which could be a very good benefit. Also, it looks like tax rates may be a little lower next year just because of inflation. So go ahead and defer income to next year if you can, and do some tax harvesting. We are doing tax harvesting right now on our accounts, but if you have outside accounts, make sure they do the same. And then I just, on a personal note, as you know, Dryden is a veteran. He is a retired colonel in the Army, and I want to wish all the veterans that are listening today and across. I know we sent out a veterans message, but I want to thank my husband for his service.
Thank you very much, and to everybody listening, you know, if you were a veteran, thank you for your service. If you were not, thank you for paying your taxes. I know you probably don't like to do that, but you know, my daughter has a dad because somebody bought me an armor-plated Humvee and body armor. I wouldn't be here otherwise. So I appreciate the American taxpayer because they buy body armor that keeps soldiers safe. So God bless all of you. Happy Veterans Day.
And the next podcast is on December 19th, which is a Thursday, our normal podcast day, a Thursday, which is the day right after the federal meeting, the Fed meeting, which we think is going to be reducing interest rate by another 0.25%. So with that, we wish you a happy Thanksgiving coming up and a happy Veterans Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Layla Pence is a registered representative with, and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA/SIPC. Dryden Pence is a registered representative with, and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA/SIPC. The financial professionals affiliated with PWM are registered representatives with and securities and investment advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA/SIPC. Pence Wealth Management PWM and LPL Financial are separate entities.